Into the unknown. Get ready for a fascinating journey into the unknown with today's guest on Truth Be Told Paranormal. We're thrilled to welcome the incredible Kathleen Johns, an internationally recognized psychic medium who has spent her life bridging the gap between this physical world and the afterlife. Hailing from Montana, stunning big sky country, Kathleen was a psychic child, an intuitive young adult, and now a seasoned medium who has helped countless people find their peace through connections with their loved ones who has passed on. Her first book, Echoes from the Afterlife, is filled with jaw-dropping true stories, live mediumship demonstrations, and invaluable insights about life after death. In this spirit of Halloween season, whether you're curious about what the afterlife holds, how to communicate with spirit, or even what messages animals might be trying to send, Kathleen has the answer. Prepare to have your perspective transformed as we dive deep into the mysteries of the soul, grief, and the power of love that transcends death. I'm your host, Tony Sweet. Welcome to the Truth Be Told Studios for the first time, psychic medium Kathleen Johns. Kathleen, how are you?
I'm doing great, Tony. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I just now noticed I have the sun shining through my window and it's hitting me right. or is that orbs? Orbs that are surrounding.
It makes you look more angelic.
There we go. I'm sure a few people will disagree, but hey, I'll take it. Well, thank you again for being here. I'm excited to have you here for the first time. I'm excited to talk about your book, Echoes from the Afterlife. We are in the Halloween season. We've been talking about ghosts and spirits and hauntings, but it all leads to the afterlife. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to have you on and talk about, something that eventually we're all going to be in the afterlife. So, first, let's get started by questioning. In your book, you talk about being a natural-born medium. Could you explain what the journey was like growing up, and then when you first realized your psychic abilities? And one last question. Is it hereditary?
Well, that's a pretty complex question, series of questions there. I would have to say that my very first recollection of knowing that I was having an interaction with someone that passed on happened upon the death of my mother when I was 3.5 years old.
Oh, wow.
And so I talk about it in my book and how it kind of, on the one hand, was very confusing to me, but on the other hand, it also piqued my curiosity about what was possible once our energy leaves the body. My mother's mother was a psychic medium and a spiritualist minister in Los Angeles, California, the Reverend Marjorie Moon. And my father's mother was a tarot card reader in Detroit, Michigan.
Both sides.
Yes, and her mother was also a tarot card reader, going back many generations to the founding families of what is now Canada. So they did their readings in French, and they used French tarot cards. So many generations on that side. And actually, on both sides of my family, my mother's family descends from some very well-known, free-thinking, I would call them more free-thinking rather than religious founders of this country. So, it goes way back. And I write about this in my book as well, Tony, because a lot of people say, well, is it hereditary? And the simple answer is, I don't really know. I believe that everyone is psychic.
Right.
Everyone is born with an inherent ability at birth to be able to use an extrasensory perception. Whether or not they choose to develop it,
right,
that's up to them. I mean, someone had to be the first one to go, ooh, look at this neat trick I can do, right?
Right.
And, we know that with each generation, our children don't have to reinvent the wheel. With each generation, our kids are smarter than we are. And I'd like to think that that development in our energetic part of our being also goes by the same type of rules or by the same type of momentum, that we grow in that way as well. So
I,
I don't
I,
know.
I agree, because I think when you're a child and you have a gift, and or if you're just in the kitchen with grandma or mom and you say, I have a fascination with cooking, and they're like, no, 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 you just go play. Well, if you never get to go into the kitchen and cook, you're not going to be able to learn the ability to cook, and maybe at a later stage in your life. It could be with anything, a skill that your dad, building a, contractor, and you never allow your daughter or son to participate in building. I mean, or on the other turn, you let your son help or daughter help, and they become contractors and become very good at it. It's the same thing. I think growing up, I used to see a ghost in my house when I grew up, and my dad, of course, was like, I don't believe in that stuff, which, that's his, that's up to him if he doesn't want to believe that. But I think when you have the ability, such as psychic abilities, and somebody constantly tells you that you're just imagining things, or you're, it's not real, and then eventually you're going to go, oh, okay, it's, I'm just don't have the ability. So I agree. And I think if you're around it like you were, people probably maybe encouraged you, and it gave you the opportunity to believe and work that craft early.
Yes and no. My
Oh,
father was totally against it.
yep.
Remember, my mother passed when I was 3.5. And this, my granny in LA, I grew up in Los Angeles for the first 13 years of my life. And so my granny that lived in LA would come down and see me once a month. And we had to be very careful in our conversations if my father was present. But once I became a little bit more adult, I was able to go and visit Granny on my own. And of course, after she passed away, I inherited her writings and a lot of transcripts from mediumship
Oh, wow.
sessions that she had done herself.
Amazing.
So through that way, I learned. But it's interesting. You said something very interesting about the imagination earlier. And, the imagination, it's okay if you imagine it. Being open is really where it is, because how do you think some of the greatest inventions ever known to humanity got created? They were imagined first. Imagination is a very, very powerful place to be and to go. And I often encourage people when they want to connect with loved ones in the afterlife, people say, my husband died a year ago, and it seems like he's contacted everyone but me. He comes and sees his sister, he comes and sees his mom. Why doesn't he want to speak to me? Is he angry to me or with me? And my question to them is always, well, have you asked him to come and visit you? Oh, I would just be making that up.
Mm-hmm.
But are you? Do you think that you smell his cologne? Didn't that just happen to you yesterday? Yes, it did. Well, is that imagination, or is that extrasensory perception?
Ah, yeah. So that's something to think about, people. And I agree that, I used to, as a kid, like I said, I used to see a ghost, but for many years, as I went on, I feel like I've lost that connection, even though I had a very good connection with being intuitive in, what is it called? Oh, it's that middle-aged brain fart. Where empath. There we go.
Yes,
an empath. I'm very empathic with people, and I do have to really watch out with certain people that I'm around.
Yes.
And so I did always keep that, and that was always very strong. Because a lot of psychics always say, "Oh, I feel you're very intuitive," and so can you talk about that when somebody says you're intuitive? Because mothers have it, that mother intuition. People have it, but what is the difference between intuitive and a psychic or psychic medium? Because people do throw out a lot of terms, and we're like, what am I? What am I?
What is this?
Yes.
Well, let's just start with the dirty word of the industry, psychic. There is a lot of misconception around that word. I choose to use it because psychic is really actually a very beautiful word. It comes from the word psychikos in the Greek language, and it means of the soul. So anything pertaining to the soul is what I pick up in people. When I work with a client, or even when I'm doing mediumship on stage live, what I'm working with is the auric arc, or the higher self, or the energy signature of any being that, living and dead, past, present, future, any being that has an energy signature. I can hone in on that, and I get little parts and pieces, and I put together a story. So I get what looks like little Polaroid snapshots of scenarios, memories, things like height, weight, description of the physical body. I get all of that. I get graphs and grids and numbers. I am a full spectrum clairvoyant, which means that all of my clairsenses are active when I read. So I can smell things, which is clairalience. I can taste things, clairgustance. I hear things, clairaudience, and so on and so forth. And I just start telling the story.
Right.
Now, if I'm doing that with a client, then I will say, okay, Sally, I'm getting this man who's 6'2" tall, very thin. He shows me that in his life he worked on the railroad. He says he is a loved one of yours. Do you know who this man is? And Sally will say, well, yes, that was my grandfather. Okay, this is what he has to say to you. And I just give the message. Now, not all the readings that I do are mediumship readings. Some of the readings that I do are more psychic, intuitive, as we would call therapeutic,
right,
for people that may be making decisions in their life and want to know which way to go. I do my work in that regard. And with most of my work, what I want from the client when we start is nothing. I want their name, and I maybe want their birth date. They don't have to give me the year, but the date and the month is helpful. I don't want any of this beforehand because, as you know, Tony, everything is on Google nowadays. So I can get all kinds of information from someone if I was looking for that. I don't want that, because the things that I tell people in session, whether as a medium, psychic medium, or as a psychic, a therapeutic psychic, the things that I tell them are not anything that they would share on social media.
Right.
At least I hope they wouldn't.
Right.
And so, you know, I go through my thing and I say, this is what I'm seeing. Do you understand this? And not because I am condescending to them, but saying, do you recognize this in your life right now? And they most of the time say, yes, I do. And then we continue down that path. So that's the way that I've been working for pretty much the last 35 years of my career.
Wow. And I know you mentioned also in your book about evidential mediumship. And
Yes.
and what I'm excited to talk about that. And for the people, again, that don't know much about what evidential, which I think is very important when it comes to mediumship, can you explain
Absolutely.
what makes mediumship evidential and why it's important?
Yes, evidential mediumship is about providing evidence of who the person that you are bringing forward, or it doesn't even have to be a person, who the energy was in life when they were walking the earth, or when they lived on earth. So let's say I do a reading for someone, a mediumship reading. I will be connecting to one of their pets that died. And I will talk about their cat being a white cat with a very pink nose and little black socks on every foot but one. That's evidential. That's evidential. I haven't seen a picture. I've never met this cat in real life, or in the flesh, as I like to call it, but I can describe features about this cat as though I have. I describe the features about the energy coming forward from the afterlife as though I'm looking at a picture of it, or as though I am communicating, as though they're sitting right in front of me, which in a sense they are, because I connect to their energy body.
Right.
But the way that I do that is actually through the aura of my client. I believe that we bring with us in our lives the energy connection, or how would I want to say it? Those that we've loved and we've bonded with have a permanent spot in our souls. And our soul is an energetic vibration. Our soul is all vibration. And so their vibration merges with our vibration, and it's almost like an infusion.
Right.
And I pick up that energy and I read it just as though I were reading somebody who was living, and giving that evidence. A lot of the evidence that I give will be shared memory, like, okay, I have your grandfather here. Do you remember the time he took you fishing at the big lake and you caught a huge fish and it totally freaked you out? Do you remember that? Yeah, I do. That's evidence. That's not something that I would know in any way. It's a shared memory. And that's really important to do, because
Yeah, very important.
How do they know that you don't have somebody else that you're talking to, or that you have a connection to anyone at all?
And I've worked with many psychics, and one thing that I did find fascinating, where a lot of their callers were mostly English speaking, and
Yes.
but have you ever had an opportunity to do readings for people from other cultures, other languages? Because,
Yes.
getting Mary, Bob, Amy, and all that stuff can be very simple. But if it's,
Oh,
names that cannot even be pronounced, or even locations that seem very unfamiliar. So how does that work? Is it kind of
yes.
sometimes, or is spirit in one language, or is the language kind of a barrier that you have to break through?
Well, language is like a system. And when I'm speaking to someone in spirit, when I say that I clairaudiently hear them,
Mm-hmm.
it's not the same as having a conversation between
Right.
you and I. We can communicate without words. And a lot of times I communicate with the souls in the afterlife through pictures, through letters, through graphs, through grids. And I've done many readings for people that have come into my office, actually with interpreters. One of the interpreters comes in and interprets sign language, because my client is deaf. And can't hear. So that is interesting.
Right.
But when spirit shows itself and a soul presents that is out of body,
Right.
Language is insignificant. I have heard things in other languages, like names of people, and I will look at the client and I'll say, I'm having trouble pronouncing this name, but it sounds like Behave. And they will say, oh my goodness, very close. The name was, something a little different than that.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes from my grandfather, who was from Syria.
Oh, wow.
And you go, oh, okay, I get that. But yeah, so I just do my best and I say what comes in, and I'm always just pleasantly surprised at how accurate it is when you're truly connected. I write about this in my book. There are things that I have no understanding of,
Right.
with my human filter and my experience. And I'd like to think, my experience is pretty diverse.
Right.
But I'm one of 9 siblings, and
Oh,
I've had
wow.
lots of different life experiences. I've lived in Los Angeles and Montana and Jackson, Wyoming and Arizona, and, just different places. I would like to think that I have had a lot of different experiences, but truth be told, no. And, the soul, I like to say that every soul is individual as a fingerprint.
Right. Right.
You never know what you're going to find when you start digging around in the nimbus of a soul, right? You just don't know. You
No,
don't know what's going to come out.
I
Got to be
agree.
ready for anything.
And I love that about what you're talking about, because you have got to experience so many different things, and I think that's what makes a lot of psychics, I believe. There's a few out there that are not. They're maybe intuitive, but the intentions aren't there to do better or to enhance the world in a better place. But I like what you're saying. And speaking of that, about 60 years ago, October 30th, my mother passed away. And I think working around a lot of psychics helped me through the process of grieving.
Yes.
But I noticed that many of your clients' stories focus on helping people through their grief process. And in your experiences, how does communicating with loved ones in the afterlife, how does that help the grieving process? Because, like, again, none of us get out of this alive. Parents, grandparents, children. So how do the grief and through readings help?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to understand that in our culture, we don't really have a lot of places to put our grief. A lot of people, when they've had a loss of a loved one, they get told, okay, it's been a year, get over it. Now, that doesn't always work for everyone. We don't have a lot of ways to express our grief in our culture because I think, quite frankly, people are afraid to appear weak or to appear vulnerable. And so in the back of my book, I give a guided visualization about how you can become your own medium. And I also recorded the audio for the guided visualization on my YouTube channel, and there's a link to that in the book as well. I take people on a journey where they can open up to the idea of connecting to their loved one in the afterlife. And I also give them a list of ways to prepare to go through the passageway of grief. There are all kinds of things that we can do with our parasympathetic nervous system to stimulate our being into becoming open and aware, and to allow ourselves to receive communication with the afterlife. Because when you think about it, you saw a ghost when you were a child, and what did your parents say? No, that's not real. We're conditioned and we're taught to believe that what we are seeing is not real. And I'm asking people in my book to suspend their belief. What if it is real? And what if you could get what so many people seek? They come and they say, I need closure with my loved one who died because I didn't get to say goodbye, or we had an argument right before they died, or, I wasn't speaking to them for many years. How do I get that? And truth be told, I don't believe that there is any real complete closure when you lose a loved one. This grief thing, this sadness, it's the price we pay for loving someone so much, or any being, a pet or a tree. I mean, when my family cut our tree down that I grew up with, I grieved for a really long time. We're empaths. We connect and we bond to other energetic beings. And so helping people to, first of all, believe that anything is possible is a big part of what I do. And then secondly, by bringing in their loved ones and providing them evidence, they will sit across from me and the tears will stream down their face. And that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing, because it means that they are having that energetic vibratory resonance inside their being that says, yes, I remember you. I'm connecting with this soul and I am bringing you close to me, and I'm going to get that reconnection, even if it's just for 10 minutes. It's amazing what it can do for people. I've had people come back after a mediumistic experience, come back to their bodies, because remember, we're souls first, bodies second, right? If we're empaths. And they come back in their bodies and they look at me and they say, I've been carrying this for so long, and I feel like this huge weight has been lifted from my being. I feel like my loved one is right here, and they've been right here all along. And that's the aim. That's what this work aims to do. That's from a mediumistic standpoint, but in traditional psychotherapy, there are a lot of tests around this very interesting type of psychotherapy called induced after-death communication. I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's traditional psychotherapists are using this to teach people how to communicate with their loved ones in the afterlife and encourage them to do it as a way to get them out of being stuck in deep grief. I like to say that grief is a place to visit, but we can't live there. You can't live there. And there are a lot of people whose lives have stopped when they have lost a loved one, particularly after the massive number of people that have passed during our COVID pandemic. They didn't get to say goodbye. One minute they're talking to their loved one, the next minute they're intubated in a hospital where they can't even go and visit them. So I believe that these kinds of therapies, certainly working with a medium that knows what they're doing and is ethical about the kind of work that they do, or working even with a psychotherapist through IADC therapy. These things are they're protocols for helping people cross that bridge, and that's one of the things that a lot of people don't realize. The word medium is just a bridge. I'm a conduit. From the higher consciousness where we are all one, where all souls are together, to the information goes through me to my audience, whether that be a whole room full of people, a theater full of people, or a group of 1 or 5 people. That's what a medium does. They're a bridge for communication. And if I can do this and help people get unstuck and get out of constant pain, anxiety. They say that losing a loved one can be as hard on the body as a heart attack. Lots of studies published in the New England Journal of Medicine. I believe those studies were out of Johns Hopkins University or Johns Hopkins Medical. So I'm a huge believer that this work can make people feel back to as normal as they can be after going through something so tragic. It's actually a miracle. Tony, I've lost audio.
How about now?
That's great.
There we
Thank
go.
you.
No, I was just saying that, losing my mother is the hardest thing that ever happened to me.
Yes.
I mean, I saw it coming, but it was one of those, like you said, no matter how much you prepare and know it's coming, it doesn't alleviate any of the pain. But like I said, working with a lot of psychics, it does help the grieving process, because she's in a better place, she's out of pain, all that stuff. But one thing that I'm going through now is my father, he's still alive. He's coming up on 90 years old.
Yay.
Yeah. He's in a nursing home now. And I am going to be in the process of selling the home that he lived in. But my grandparents owned it before my father. And
Yes.
so the grieving process for me is not there, but some of my siblings are having a grieving process of me selling the home. I'm curious as a mediumship, when it comes to a lot of implanted memories there. For me, it's all about, I would rather have somebody else create new memories for them versus trying to maintain something I'm never going to live in. So I just feel that from a mediumship perspective, how do you grieve that when it's, because there's still implants of grandma and grandpa and my dad, my mom that live there, and so in some ways I feel like there's a spiritual connection to that land. But how do you let that go versus a person?
Yes. Well, it's amazing. You can walk into a room and you can just
Oh yeah.
feel how spirited that room
Yep.
is, or you can walk onto a piece of property, 20 acres, and you can feel what the people that went there for the very first time, the original inhabitants, what their hopes and dreams and desires for that place
Hmm.
were. And the way that you grieve that is exactly as you just said. You're willing to move on from this
Hmm.
in order to allow someone else to come in and
Yeah.
make new memories. And that's absolutely beautiful. Your siblings may not have the same feelings about that, though, because it's really funny. Because our culture doesn't really encourage healthy grieving process at
Right.
this time, which I'm hoping that people like me, with our messages can change that.
Hmm.
But because we don't really encourage that, many people place their grief in inanimate objects like
Right.
homes
Right.
and things and money, which is why when, the will gets read,
Oh yeah.
everybody's duking it out to, but it's because people get weird when people die. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah.
It's dysfunctional at best, and that's really, really normal.
Yeah.
And what you might want to do is invite your siblings to participate in saying goodbye
Yeah.
to your home, and bring in a shaman or
Oh.
a medium or psychic, even
Hmm.
a Reiki master can do it, and have a little ceremony in which you talk about how, grandpa lived here, grandma lived here, mom and dad, we grew up here, but we no longer leave our souls in this place.
Hmm.
We're going to all clear out. Come on, grandpa, let's go.
Yep.
Come on, mom, let's go. So that new inhabitants can enjoy this very
Yeah.
special energy of this geographic location. You can do that.
I think that's beautiful.
I would suggest that you could even make it like a party.
That would be a great, just throw a big party and to say goodbyes, and and like you said, come on, grandpa, get in the car, let's go about, because I'm
Yeah.
from Kansas originally, so the house is back in Kansas. I'm here in California, so yeah.
Kansas is a beautiful place. I love
Yeah.
Kansas.
It's yeah, where I'm from, it's in southeast, it's in the Flint Hills of Kansas. It's really pretty in the valley, down in, and very small town, 300 people, if that. So yeah, it's but yeah, for me, I would never live there again, just because I've been gone for 30 some years, blah blah blah, and so for me, it's not the connection that because all mine is here. I remember those good times. So, and I would like to talk about a little bit about your afterlife perspective, because based on your experience in communicating with the afterlife, what are some of the insights that you have gained about the purpose of life? Because we hear people all the time going, "Oh, I don't know my purpose. I don't know my purpose." I mean, this is not just 20-year-olds. This is people in their 50s, 60s, 70s. Sometimes we get older and you're like, I'm tired of even trying to find my purpose. I'm just going to enjoy what time I have here, which, because I feel like we accomplished one thing and you're like, well, that didn't fulfill it, and I'm going to try something else. What is your perspective? Is it just we have many purposes? Maybe that's what it is.
I believe that the only purpose that we are really here for, ultimately, is to love and be loved in a very universal way. Loving one another, being part of the collective, that really is what purpose is for me.
Right.
But a lot of folks believe that purpose for them means having maybe a job that they feel connected to, and they feel that they're contributing back to humanity in some way. Some people feel that it might be a skill set, or like me, an ability that they practice with people. Some people, maybe artists, or they may be technologically advanced, and they're going to create the next, I don't know, rocket ship, or maybe, I don't even know what that technology is. That's really mind-bending. Maybe they're going to be the first person to prove contact with extraterrestrials, I mean, so purpose, I believe, in our culture is really defined as usually being merged with the job. And when people ask me about that, what I ask them in return is I say, tell me the first thing that comes to your mind that excites you, that you're excited about doing. Because if you follow that, follow your bliss, it is true, then you're going to be able to figure out if you can merge that thing that lights you up with a calling in life. Now, if you're one of those people that just wants a paycheck, there's nothing wrong with that either. Maybe you just want a paycheck, but in your after hours, you make lovely artwork. That's great. That's purpose as well. I feel that we get the idea of commercial success confused with purpose. And what I believe we're here to do is I believe that we are here to become empowered to be our own authority on who we are and what we bring to humanity, what we bring to the table, right? And every choice that we make to advance that understanding leads us closer to the end game, which is fulfillment in purpose. But I don't believe that purpose can be anyone, name tag. Hello, my name is Kathleen and I'm a psychic medium.
Right.
That's not my purpose. In this life, I found purpose in being a mother and being a grandmother and being a community member, there's lots of ways that I found purpose in being able to give back.
I love that. And yeah, I like I said, I just feel sometimes people think there's one purpose that they're supposed to do, and it's supposed to. And I feel like maybe social media has kind of made them feel like the purpose is supposed to be grand, and sometimes it's not a grand gesture of, changing the world, but maybe it's changing one person, or maybe it's just creating something amazing that the family loves to eat every Saturday. I don't know. I just feel like sometimes we think there's constantly things that we have to, have a purpose for. And I just feel like that's a waste of a lot of energy, and just enjoying life around you could be your purpose. I don't know.
Absolutely. Fame is a huge trap. The cult of celebrity is, I believe, another dimension. I believe that the virtual world is another dimension. I believe that we live multidimensionally. And so we're not just, three-dimensional beings. We have our foot over here and our foot over there. And we really have to decide where we want to put our time and what's important to us. And for me, those that I love, that's where the importance lies.
Amen to that. Well, let's. I know we've been touching on it, but let's talk about your purpose for writing the book. So tell us, Echoes from the Afterlife. So give us what made you, because I know you're in your 20s now, and you wanted to put the pen to paper. Maybe it was a typewriter, but what made you want to put this book together?
Well, I have been asked for years by my clients to write a book, because the things that we do in session and the things that I do in my work as a medium, a lot of it is unbelievable. And they want it documented. They wanted it documented. They think it's fascinating. I wrote the book for them as a handbook to the work that I do, so that maybe by giving examples, people could understand it more fully. And in the book, I give examples from client cases, of course, names and identifying features tweaked so that, it's not completely recognizable. Although I did have permission from a few people to go ahead and use their names. So there's that. Another part of the book documents the paranormal investigations that I've been a part of over the years. I use 3 of them in there that I really love, the 3 stories that I chose. And then at the back of the book, I give many pages, I think maybe something like 30 pages or a little bit more, of actual audio transcripts from live medium events that I've done in 2024, where I bring those in the afterlife forward for members of a live audience. And these are audio transcripts that I've transcribed and only changed identifying information or redundancy, because, I'm known to say things like a lot, or a lot when I'm presenting. It's just part of my personality. So I took all that stuff out. But that's what the book is really for, is a handbook to what I do. Because when people say, what do you do? I tell them I'm a psychic medium. And then all of a sudden, and it doesn't matter who's sitting at the table with me. Literally, there could be people that have jobs that are way more fascinating than mine,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll say I'm a psychic medium, and all of a sudden everyone goes silent and the whole room looks my way. And this book fills that need for more understanding of what psychic mediums do, what I do, and what it really is. Because I don't have a crystal ball, big hoop earrings, and a turban. That's not what being a psychic medium looks like today in 2024.
I love.
And by the way, it didn't look that way for my grandmother when she was practicing in Los Angeles in the 1940s. It didn't look that way for her either.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really, it was, I decided to write it because so many people asked me to do so. They just want more information. And I was happy to give it to them.
And I think what I love that you're have been in different states, and this book, I think, is an opportunity for people to purchase and understand where you come from, and also what the psychic mediumship, how it can help society versus, because you've been in a lot of places that could religious-wise look down upon. And so I know growing up in Kansas that, it definitely is not always it's changed. I have to say it's changed since growing up in the 70s and 80s and 90s. But I think all the TV shows have helped in some ways to be making people more open to it. I've noticed people, when I say I'm part of the paranormal with psychics and ghosts, and people get a little more excited and a little more open to talk about it versus keeping it to themselves. So I
think I agree with you. It's really funny because I've had clients that are religious figures, they're bishops or clerics or
That's
priests.
great.
And I asked one time, I said, I would think that because of your calling, you aren't down with what I'm doing. And he looked at me, and he was a bishop. He was an elder in a church in my community. And he said, Kathleen, of course I believe in what you're doing, because if I didn't, then I would be limiting the scope of my God. My God is not a narrow God. My God is a very vast and expansive God.
Exactly.
So yes, I believe in what you're doing. And the other thing, Tony, with my work, I like to say that I'm omni-religious. I believe in all of it and none of it at the same time. And I don't talk religion with my clients. And so let's say I have someone's grandmother come through and she shows me a crucifix, and I can talk about how Catholic she was and how, the grandma knows that you haven't been saying your prayers every night and you haven't been going to confession, and you need to fix that, right? Okay, so I can say that, and it's not really speaking about religion. I feel religion gets people tripped up. Just like a lot of things in our society do. And so I don't really, skeptics are nothing new to me.
Oh yeah.
People will come up with all kinds of excuses not to believe in the unseen, but I'll tell you, I have never seen a molecule of oxygen, but
Right.
I know it's there, and I know it's real, and I have to have it or I couldn't live. And people that are wanting to speak to their loved ones who have crossed over usually have been in communication with them and they do not realize it
Mm-hmm.
because their loved one will come to them in something other than a full body apparition. They will smell the favorite coffee of this person that passed away, even though there is no coffee brewing. They will hear
Yeah.
a name, their nickname called out, and there's nobody else in the room.
I find pennies or dimes all the time.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I didn't write about this in my book, but when my father died, my father believed that when you pass, you have to pay the man at the river Styx, right? To get across the river, right? He believed in Egyptian mythology.
That's great.
And so my father and I, when I was little, we used to collect those little wreath pennies, the little ones with the wheat. Okay. And so when I got the phone call that Dad had passed, I immediately began to look for a wheat penny. And I told my partner at the time, I said, my dad has died. I have to go to LA for his funeral. And I'm looking for a wheat penny. And he goes, like this? And I said, where did you get that? He said, I don't know. It just showed up on the table today.
Wow.
For a week afterwards, as I went to his funeral, left Montana, got on a plane, went to LA, I found 4 wheat pennies in the weirdest places, like on the sidewalk in front of me.
That's amazing.
Et cetera, et cetera. And before we laid him to rest, he wanted to be buried. I lifted up his hand because his hands were placed across his chest. And I put that penny in there.
That's nice.
For him as payment. And I actually have had psychics, really good mediums, pick up on that gift that I gave my father for his payment into the afterlife.
That's amazing.
They'll say, what is it about you and your dad and a coin?
That's pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing. That is evidential mediumship.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, before we get out of here, because we only have about 5 minutes left, I have 2 questions. And I kind of want to make this one fun because we are part of the Halloween season. And I want to know from a psychic medium point of view, when the veil is between worlds, they say is the thinnest at this time of year. Do you find more restless souls showing up around this time or more calm spiritual vibes?
I would say that I find both. So with the veil between the worlds being thinner at this time of year, for me, it all comes down to electricity. And at this time of year in Montana, it's very, very dry. So the drier the air, the better the readings are for me. This is when I like to do my paranormal investigations, actually. And I find a mixture of both. What I like to do when I am communicating with spirits via paranormal investigating, spooky kind of settings, I like to go in and I like to bring someone with me that can take notes or they can do audio. I don't like to use a lot of the equipment because quite frankly, it gets in the way of my own senses.
Right.
So I'll often trail behind or in front of a group of paranormal investigators that have all the EVP and all of that kind of thing. And I just like to walk through and use my body as, if you will, like a psychic barometer or thermometer for reading the room or the space. And then I just wait and I listen to the stories of the people that come in. And I just tell the stories. And I love going into places that I know nothing about the history. And I can get the stories. And then later go in with a private investigator or a historian and research the actual address. It's so much fun. And I've gotten to do these investigations all over the US and in other parts of the world. In Ireland, had a very spooky encounter with an energy at an old Irish jail.
Oh,
that sort of thing. It's a lot of fun, but I refrain from ghost hunting. And the reason I do not ghost hunt is because I don't hunt animals and I don't hunt other people. And I just don't find it attractive to taunt or tease or try to stimulate an energy in another realm that doesn't wish me any harm. Why would I want to bully them into appearing? That's not cool. I don't do it.
You're right. Maybe hunting should be a different word too. because that does sound very aggressive.
It does.
Well, just for fun purposes,
Yes.
what has been some of give us one example of the most haunted place that you have been, and how did you handle it as a psychic medium?
Well, I wrote about it in my book, actually. There's a place in Galton Gateway, Montana, and now it's called Stacy's Bar and Grill. But it used to be called the Old Faithful Inn. And I did a walkthrough in the 1990s, having never been in that space before. And you have to remember, in the 1990s, there was no such thing as looking up haunted locations on the internet.
Right,
we
right.
didn't have that ability. And so I walked through the space, and I immediately connected with a man that had been murdered in the bar.
Ooh.
And he came through me as clearly as though I was seeing through his eyes. And how I handled that as a medium was I just allowed it to happen. You know, when you do mediumship, you get skilled enough to be able to say, I want this to be this close or this far away.
Right.
And you don't have to experience anything that you don't want to. I really have a lot of doubts about people who say they were overtaken by a spirit or possessed by a spirit.
Yeah.
You have to have your boundaries, just like you do as a human.
Right.
You're not going to let another human overtake you or, you know, knock you down and take the life out of you.
Right.
If you can help it, right? So having boundaries when you investigate is also important. And fortunately, with this entity, I had good boundaries, and he really just wanted to tell his story. And I told his story in a magazine, and his wife's granddaughter contacted me, as did his nephew. They both contacted me, and I was able to get the families back together in real time.
Oh, that's
and
amazing.
Now they're in communication with one another, and it's just absolutely lovely. I believe that the spirit of this man, I call him the piano man, is my friend.
Oh,
and I
that's nice.
actually visit his gravesite regularly and play him jazz music because he loved it so.
I love that. That's a nice story. I love those stories. Well, the last thing is, some people in the chat room, John said, can you connect with my father in spirit? Now, we're not doing psychic readings for our listeners today, but you can always reach out to KathleenJohns.com. But for people that said, I want to reach my loved one, how can they connect? Maybe if not, you know, visually seeing them, hearing, how do you suggest people at home try to connect with their loved one? You know, is it meditation? Is it going to their favorite restaurant? Is it just the memory of the person? How does one do that without calling Kathleen?
For exactly that purpose, on my YouTube channel, I put the guided visualization for initiating contact with the deceased.
Oh.
It's just the audio, because I don't want people being distracted by watching me speak it. So I just put a little, it's a candle. It's an image of a candle. And I did the audio behind it. And it is a guided visualization that I can lead you through, that you can learn and practice at home to become your own medium.
Love it. And then the last is, and I suggest that you get a hold of Kathleen at KathleenJohns.com, but says, I felt pulling to get my first reading today. A friend recommended Kathleen months ago, and her name came back to mind. I came to YouTube to search for her, and here you both were. What does that mean? Because we
Synchronicity.
Yes.
The universe at work.
I believe, you know, there's nothing really is a coincidence. I think a lot of times the universe connects us to where we need to go and what we need to do.
Yes.
And we just need to listen. And so, so what do you tell people like that with synchronicity?
Anything is possible. We don't understand. We know this much with our teeny tiny little walnut brains. We always want to logic everything.
Right.
And life is not logic. We are spirits first, bodies second, souls first, bodies second. And remembering that, I think, is key to figuring out all the great mysteries of this thing we call life on Earth, right?
Right.
And just when we get it and we think we know it, guess what? We get another experience, life beyond life, in our next incarnation. It's just anything is possible. And living between the worlds and learning how to navigate, being a soul in a multiverse is it's a learning curve, because I think now in 2024 we live so expansively and so interdimensionally that anybody's guess is as good as mine. I'm trying to navigate it too. It's wild. It's wild, and it's very fast paced.
I love it. Well, Kathleen, thank you so much. Pete, everybody, the book just came out October 4th, I believe. Echoes from the Afterlife, and my eyes, I think, Memoirs of a Montana Medium. There we go. My eyes wouldn't read that close. But go to KathleenJohns.com and go to Amazon. You can pick the book up there. Always leave a 5-star and leave some great comments, because we loved seeing our authors do well with their work, and we hope Kathleen comes back and sees us again.
Thank you so much, Tony. It was lovely to be with you today and to meet you. Thank you.
Of course. Please come back. And thank you, everybody, for being here. I have to say, I always love interviewing people like Kathleen that get to go out into the field and do the work where I don't get to do as much. So I get to live through them, and I hope you feel the same way. Please check out Robert Hensley on Monday with Minuteman Report, Bonnie Burkert on Wednesday with Truth Be Told Transformation, and me every Friday right here on the Club Paranormal channel. Until next time, take care of yourself and each other. Bye-bye.